let's get back to the name. What do people think of the work programme for dummies as a name for the course?
It's a bit condescending, really, and quite, people are not going to be happy with it. It's like, they're going to come in, I'm a dummy now, and make them feel insecure about their knowledge.
What, anybody else?
Will there be copyright issues with it? As in, I don't know. Just there's a whole series of books.
Hands. Who thinks it's a really great name and we should run with it? I think that says it all, doesn't it? I think that says it all.
It's not great. Can anyone think of inspiration, creativity? Has anyone got any kind of alternatives that they
maybe as
work program?
We'll do it as an icebreaker.
It's simple for everybody. Make it for you to understand it. All the sections, what it's all about. That's what we make simple. That's my.
How to avoid sanctions, how to avoid the pitfalls.
Coming on our course, we're not getting them into employment, are we?
How to get started.
Training and you
Work
breaking.
programme made simpler than it was before.
No, not before. That's
Okay, if we could have your ideas, maybe 1, 2 or 3 that you might have talked about.
Say the last one, was it?
The last one that we come up with, what's that work programme? What is it about? Work programme, what is it about? And work programme for beginners.
work program made simple.
Made simple.
Yeah, and then the second one is work program.
Then we have an hyphen.
Hyphen route to employment.
Route to employment.
Work it out. And the other one was work programme workout.
Work programme workout.
That's good.
Okay, we'll do a quick vote. So raise your hands for what's up work programme.
You know how this is going to go.
You can vote for the scrap outside about this. Work programme route to employment.
I quite like it because it sounds positive.
What's up work programme?
Everybody?
So that's 3. Work programme workout. I quite like that one. Well, that's too many to count. We've got a new name, so that's nice. So underneath the aim of this session, we've got 5 learning objectives. You'll probably remember these from when we developed them. So we're going to work through the lesson plan in the same way that we just did for universal credit, and you'll see what we've tried to do is have a kind of theme that cuts across the 4 different topics. So the starting off exercise, after all the usual icebreakers, introductions, housekeeping, etc. So 10:15 is the ideas thought shower, and again this is designed really to get people's ideas, what they do already know about the work programme out, and then really identify things where they might need some more answers, so questions that they've got, in the same way that we asked you in the development sessions that we ran to come up with questions, because we thought those questions are the ones that real participants will want the answers to.
We tried to make them really sort of consistent in a way, kind of start in the same way and end in the same way, so people delivering them will kind of have a feel for how they run, and there's sort of a consistency about how we do things, and also so things like maybe the snakes and ladders game can be used again and again as you go through doing it.
Anything else on that first bit though?
We need to be quite clear that this discussion at the beginning of each of the modules, there needs to be some rules around that, you know, so because otherwise that's the first thing you're doing at the beginning of the day and everyone's getting fired up and angry, and you know, so I think just having some boundaries around that. Yeah, feel free to talk about your experiences, but I think if we start straying into kind of politics and personal agendas, it's going to ruin the rest of the session for people. So just having something...
Which is obviously challenging because it's highly political.
Yes.
But it's true, and you might want to think about having something at the beginning of the day in your agreement that you keep it professional, you keep it related to your job, the clients that you're working with, and not about what's great about it and what's terrible about it. Lisa?
I'd just like to get your views as trainers, I think, maybe potentially as co-trainers. I mean, what are your kind of hints for if you get somebody who just starts talking on and on and on about their own experience and just keeps going, oh, and then this happened to me, and people will often take the floor and just not stop talking. What are things you do to try to do
in that
that?
circumstance? Go up to them and say, you're bringing out some really fantastic
I
points. They're kind of outside maybe what we're covering on this particular course. But if you could maybe share some stuff with us at lunchtime, that would be fantastic.
So acknowledge it.
It's hard to make me be quiet.
Acknowledge it. Don't
Body
dismiss
language,
it.
use your body language.
With that in mind about the fact that it's highly political and there's nothing we can do about it, to run a session around stuff that we can influence and stuff that we can't influence, just to take a couple of minutes before that conversation to thrash out what we can't influence. So the government will bring this in, there's nothing we can do about that.
I mean,
And
it's
then,
in, isn't it?
yeah, and then we capture that on a bit of flip, and then when somebody starts talking about something that we've already agreed we can't influence, and you kind of direct them to the fact we've
And we
already
can
agreed.
also use, remember when we did universal credit and we had the parking ideas and the car park, and there was like a multi-storey car park for technical questions that perhaps the welfare reform tutor could answer, and
And it's true, if people want to go on a, I don't know, an anti-poverty alliance march, that's fine, but you do that out of our training environment. There's no space for that in here.
There are places where you go when it starts.
I mean, I think you have to take the approach that it's your training environment. You are responsible for everybody having a good learning experience. So if there's one person who's messing that up, it's not just making your life really difficult as the trainer, it's spoiling everybody else's learning. So I think, within reason, you can say to people, leave the session. You know, I've invited people to leave and it really makes them shut up, I can tell you. You can say, you know, the door's there, you're welcome to leave. We're not going to be able to cover the things that you're looking for today. 9 times out of 10 people just shut up and get on with it.
And remember the time boundaries. We've got 10 minutes for this exercise, and you're also reminded, you know, 2 minutes to go. You know, and you give those time reminders throughout the exercise just to kind of make sure it doesn't run and run and run.
So acknowledge the person, don't dismiss them.
Acknowledge their issues.
Yeah.
Because if you say, oh no, that's rubbish, we're not going to talk about that today, you've lost that person immediately. So acknowledge what they're saying. But then you need to explain that it's not necessarily appropriate for the environment that you're in, but if they want to have a chat with you at lunch break or during the breaks.
That and say, you know, that's something that we can't influence, or like Sarah said, well, that's really great, that's really interesting, maybe we can have a talk about that in the lunchtime. So finding ways to acknowledge it, but then ending the conversation and bringing it back to the topic, that's what you need to keep doing, because remember, you've got a time, it's really important to keep to the times.
So what we've been trained to do is that when we realize that somebody is under the influence of drug or alcohol, because you see them, they'll be very chatty, so it's better to like go to them and say, would they like to come back another time? Because that influence will actually affect the way it will disrupt the training. So I think it's better to actually look out for their movement, and then to ask them to come back another time instead of.
I hadn't even thought to put that on the ground rules at the beginning of the day, because you don't expect people to go wandering off for a drink at lunchtime. But if there's the likelihood that that might happen with the participants, then lock it into the ground rules at the beginning of the day. You can always refer to that.
If they come up with the ground rules, for example, one of the participants might come up with the ground rule. If somebody's drunk or under the influence of, you know, drink or drugs, then, you know, I would feel comfortable asking, you know, whether we could ask that person to leave. So if that participants come up with the that rule, it gives them more ownership around it. You know,
it's an agreement.
That they've thought of it rather than us saying this is what the rules are.
And then the second bit, 10:45, filling out the JSA form, do's and don'ts. So we ask participants to spend 30 minutes working in pairs to fill out a blank agreement. The online thing, I've got up here the beginnings of an online form, and Claire and I started filling it in this morning for Claire, and then she realised that she perhaps might be eligible for but we stopped it before we got too far. We haven't got a paper version yet, but we're getting a paper version.
It's really hard to get a blank job seekers agreement. It's really difficult to do because it's all online now. I think what we might do is get one of our interns to go through and mock one up, maybe. You know what I mean?
I mean, you can print these pages off.
Yeah.
So, you know, it will be doable.
To go through, like I said, I'm also afraid I'm going to end up doing something and sign myself up to something I'm not supposed to.
You can get people doing it in pairs on a couple of laptops. You know, it depends on the size of the group and all that sort of thing. But, so